when it comes to messaging, to your point a minute ago, it's no longer talking about, well, this is going to cut emissions or this is going to help us address climate change. The thing that we try to emphasize is that it's not changing your values or what you're actually doing. It's just how what you emphasize and how you convey the same thing in order to reach your ultimate goal. And so you're hearing a lot of people talking about energy dominance, and that's something that we've heard a lot from the president. And so it makes sense to try to align with his priorities and make it clear to him, his administration, Republicans in Congress, how your project or your policy idea fits within that agenda, because it makes it easier for them to adopt. If you come in and say, this is going to really address climate change, you're probably going to be dismissed out of hand, and then where are you?
All right, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. Will the clean energy world survive what's going on in DC? I have brought Chris Moyer on, founder and president of Echo Communications Advisors, someone who's been knee-deep in this world for many years, advising senators, helping shape major legislation in the clean energy world, to discuss this topic. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm good, Greg. It's good to be with you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm hoping that this is going to be a positive, an uplifting conversation, as I'm definitely a pro-climate guy. And I was really excited about the clean energy space and where it was going. So why don't we cut to the chase? Like, today is June 11th or 10th. And where are we? I know we're back to the Senate in the legislation, and some people are crossing their fingers, others have kind of given up hope and looking for what's next. But why don't you give us the update? Where do you think things are going?
Sure. So we're in the thick of it right now. It's not often when you get big bills moving through Congress, but we're in the middle of it. And let me just take a step back for a second to set the scene. In 2022, as a lot of your listeners probably know, the most significant climate law was passed. The Inflation Reduction Act included a number of tax credits and provisions that were really meant to not just spur the clean energy industry in this country, but provide jobs, help communities across the country, including a lot of rural communities that haven't had investment in a long time, and bring manufacturing back to the United States. That was 2022. With the election last year, all of those things were put at risk. And the House just 3 weeks ago passed legislation that would essentially gut all of the tax credits for solar, wind, EVs, hydrogen, geothermal, nuclear, you name it. So the House just passed a bill that would gut all of the tax credits. And now the Senate is considering that legislation. If you're looking for a reason to find optimism, there's a number of senators, Republican senators, who have said they want to make significant changes to the House bill that would allow some of these credits to continue and do so in a responsible way. So, folks who are interested in this industry that is relying on these tax credits, now is the time to really make your voice heard with your member of the Senate. And again, the bill's going to have to go back to the House as well. So there's still a long way to go here. And this is crunch time, though. This is the time to really speak out and talk about all the benefits of those provisions.
All right. So subsidies and the tax credits in the energy space have been going on for a long time. I mean, even before this last legislation in 2022, it was almost a bipartisan, not too much talk about it, but these kind of tax credits were going on in the first Trump administration. And the oil and gas industry, which is a fully mature industry, makes tons of money. They get tax credits too. I mean, I'm assuming that their tax credits are not being eliminated through the proposed legislation.
Oh, that's a fair assumption, Greg. What the Inflation Reduction Act from 2022 did is really expanded a lot of the existing tax credits that had bipartisan support for years. And it's done under the cover, or under the rationale by some, is that, we can't be picking winners and losers. We can't be helping some industries and not others. But your point is a very good one, is that oil and gas receives subsidies from the federal government as well. And sometimes that is omitted from opponents of some of these other credits that are helping industries that really contribute to the challenges that we face when it comes to supply. Energy demand is growing for the first time in decades. There's all sorts of reasons for that. You've probably heard a lot about AI data centers and the demand that they're going to bring onto the grid. And we need all the electrons we can get, and that it can't just be from one source or just a couple of sources. It has to be truly an all of the above approach, and not just fossil fuels.
So, how much is the oil and gas industry? What kind of credits and subsidies are they getting annually? I mean, a smidgen of what the renewable space was getting, or
Well, they're significant. I don't have the precise numbers in front of me, but the fact of the matter is that when you look at the House bill that passed just a few weeks ago, you can see the influence of the oil and gas industry lobbying because carbon capture, for example, is something that oil and gas has invested significant funds into, and that's one of the few areas that doesn't get touched. They don't restrict the benefits of the legislation from a few years ago, because that has a lot of interest from oil and gas. So there's other provisions. Of course, oil and gas wants to get rid of anything that helps increase demand for EVs because they want cars that run on gas. That's just it's logical, I suppose. But they've been pushing to get rid of the EV tax credit, the $7,500. Um, and there's just so many things in this bill that are really beneficial to oil and gas.
when you talk about what positive things, at least from my side, my opinion, were going on with IRA, it's kind of it sounds almost illogical. One of the things that Trump wants to do with the tariffs is to bring back manufacturing, and IRA was bringing back manufacturing. And so to me, it's there's a major disconnect with what you're claiming you want to do, what was happening, and now what you're undermining. And how much of the tax credits from the IRA have been used or in place or locked in? What percentage are we talking about?
Well, your point is a good one, is that there's kind of competing goals here. There's the president stating that he wants to win the AI race. He wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. He wants to beat countries like China when it comes to pretty much anything, but certainly when it comes to um, uh, new industries and when it comes to building a supply chain in the United States and not relying on other countries. But the actions of the administration and some of the provisions in this bill that scale back the 2022 law are in complete contradiction to those goals. We are seeing a resurgence of manufacturing in the United States, largely in districts represented by Republicans. We are seeing, more affordable, quickly built energy sources like solar that's faster than getting any natural gas plant going. And with, again, these new factories and data centers and more electrification, there's more demand. So we need those quickly. The process for getting things on the grid just takes forever. Um, so I think your question about your question was how much of the tax credits have already been well, they were extended out until 2032, and the bill that just passed the House would restrict those until 2028, but also have some other strict provisions saying that you have to start construction within 60 days of the bill's passage. You have to be up and running by the end of 2028. It's very hard for these projects to have any certainty around that. And so it makes investing very, very difficult. So there's been a ton of interest in these tax credits and even more to come. And again, this is not just solar and wind, but we're talking about reliable sources like geothermal, which both parties really, really like. Nuclear got treated a little bit better in the House bill, but nuclear takes forever to build and get approval for. So there still needs to be a little bit more relaxing of the very restrictive provisions from that bill from a few weeks ago.
All right, so give my audience a little bit about your background, and what you do at Echo Communication Advisor. What, before we even get into that, I know that messaging has become a major thing in this space. In the world of in the I'm an environmentalist, so I have seen how it's gone from global warming, climate change. Now we're talking about, oh, it's creating jobs, we're reshoring manufacture, and no matter what we're doing messaging wise, doesn't seem to work. But we'll get into, and the messaging is something I know that Echo Communication Advisors does a lot with your clients. So look, give us your background and what do you do at Echo Communications?
Sure. So I've been in Washington or working on political campaigns across the country for the last coming up on 2 decades. Worked for the former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid from Nevada, and really got a good sense of with him traveling around the state, seeing all the solar arrays, seeing geothermal sites, and that really was the beginning of my education on clean energy and the important role that federal tax policy plays in spurring that innovation. And so our firm, Echo Communications Advisors, we were focused on policy exclusively. We're also exclusively working with clean energy companies, with climate advocacy organizations, and with climate tech startup companies. So there's so many, there's thousands of cool young early stage companies that are doing really interesting things coming at this from a creative way. And so we help them with achieving their federal policy goals, regulatory goals, sometimes maybe a little bit less so now, but getting funding from the government for different projects. And we help them with their strategic messaging. What's going to resonate in different political and policy environments? Uh, how can they be most effective at telling their story, their company's story, and why a certain bill or policy should become law? And we work with firms internationally, with companies internationally, and in states all across the country.
All right. So I'm assuming at this point your phone must be been ringing off the hook for the last 6 months about what's going to happen. What are you telling your people? Is there hope, or is it like moving to another industry?
Well, they have to speak up. They have to make very clear. And a lot of these companies and clients they've been going to their member of Congress's office. They've been writing letters. They've been doing social media, but they have to keep doing it. And you never know when, it takes so many repetitions of a message for it to finally break through. And the alternative is not doing enough. And then you get these really important policies pulled out from underneath you. And it really affects projects and the affordability. And sometimes it could be the difference between a project happening or not. And so this is crunch time. We're telling folks to think about the environment, think about the messaging. When it comes to messaging, to your point a minute ago, it's no longer talking about, well, this is going to cut emissions or this is going to help us address climate change. The thing that we try to emphasize is that it's not changing your values or what you're actually doing. It's just what you emphasize and how you convey the same thing in order to reach your ultimate goal. And so you're hearing a lot of people talking about energy dominance, and that's something that we've heard a lot from the president. And so it makes sense to try to align with his priorities and make it clear to him, his administration, Republicans in Congress, how your project or your policy idea fits within that agenda because it makes it easier for them to adopt. If you come in and say this is going to really address climate change, you're probably going to be dismissed out of hand. And then where are you? So we're talking about, yes, jobs is important, but also talking about American energy, energy independence. Um, we're talking about winning the global competition for all these different energy sources and the supply chains and the AI race, as I've mentioned. And it fits with the current political climate in Washington.
All right. So I'm just gonna assume that this legislation is going to go through and kneecap the whole tax credit world. And as much as I'm an environmentalist, I'm also a capitalist, and I believe in, the free market and all that. And these industries, the electric vehicle industry was in effect before, 2022, and solar, there was solar before 2022, and wind. Um, and they were surviving. Maybe they're not thriving. Maybe they needed help. Um, but I want to hear what your take is on whether you think these where these industries can go, can they survive, can they thrive? I mean, I like to take bad news and try to turn it around.
Yeah, the first thing I appreciate that approach as well. And the first thing I'd say is that this is not over. There is still a chance to influence the Senate bill, and there is a good likelihood that the bill improves. And the question is, how much will it improve? And that's why all the pushing is going to really matter over this next several weeks. They say they want to have a bill to the president's desk by July 4th. I am skeptical that that is a realistic timeline because there are too many areas of disagreement to hash out. And again, the bill still will have to go back to the House, and it's a very delicate balance. The Speaker of the House has said finding the balance is like walking across the Grand Canyon with dental floss. Uh, and it's a challenge. So it's not over yet. So keep pushing. Um, on the question of whether these industries can survive, look, it's a question not of whether they'll survive, it's whether it's going to happen in the United States or it's going to happen elsewhere, because there is demand around the world. And do we want to cede leadership to Europe, to China, to hostile nations? Do we want to, or do we want to have this happen in the United States? And I think we all would agree with that we want it to happen here, creating good jobs and that tax revenue and being proud of American industry. And so it's going to happen. It may not happen as quickly here as we would like or as we need to. And it's how many fewer jobs are going to be created as a result? How much less tax revenue will some of these communities that haven't had industry investing in decades, or are they going to lose out on? And I think we all would want to have that happen as fast as we possibly can.
Right. And, I mean, the reality is, I think at some level, even if the clean energy space thrives, that doesn't necessarily mean that will solve the climate crisis. I think there's a lot of moving parts in that as well, and we're just 1/6 of the total emissions globally, and it's been a fascinating discussion, to see how my friends and debating all this for years now. It would be, well, there's no climate change. Well, all right, there's climate change, but we can't afford it. Well, why should we stick our neck out? Look at China or whatever. And now all of a sudden, China, you know, not only are they dominating the solar industry world, but other areas related to this, and we're gonna, let them dominate. If I'm one of your clients and I see that this thing is getting shut down, tax credit wise, and it's really, going to affect my ability to financially make this a reality. Why wouldn't I just go to Canada and do it in Canada?
I think that's right, and that's honestly what is likely to happen with some of these companies, that they're left with no choice. They would really like to invest in the United States, but if you're going to make the policy environment more challenging, then that just pushes them to go to Canada, to Europe, to other places that will give them better incentives, better opportunity to actually make these projects affordable.
All right. Again, I'm just going to play, worst case scenario here. Tax credits get cut off and all that, and they're getting cut off quickly, and whatever time is left, the administration makes it impossible to get the credits anyway. What about future legislation? What about the states? Um, is there any positive opportunities there?
Well, certainly there are states like Illinois and New York and Massachusetts and California, all the states that you might realize are more left-leaning. They're doing a lot of good work, putting in place incentives and things that will attract projects in clean energy. I will say, look, presidential administration is only 4 years, and we're still early in the first year of that of this term. But we've seen swings back and forth, and we would obviously prefer something a little bit more stable that can withstand the political swings. But there will be a swing again back towards more pro clean energy and pro climate legislation and policies. So this isn't a forever thing. It just slows down the pace of growth and acceleration. And there will be opportunities. There's more nuance to a lot of these things, and there's some support. This bill is massive in Washington right now. Big bills are loaded. There's so much more in this legislation that's being considered than just the clean energy. There's tax extensions, there's tax cuts, there's I won't get into every single thing, but it's a massive issue. It's the president's number one political priority in Congress, and it's very difficult for anyone in his party to vote against it. But once we get past this, well, hopefully it's not the damage isn't as bad as we hope, but there will be a chance to do things like permitting reform to actually get some of these projects deployed. There will be a chance to find other areas of agreement that kind of fly under the high temperature of the political discourse. And so continue to advocate for policy that will help advance what we're all hoping will happen with clean energy and the growth. But there's gonna be an opportunity for that in the years ahead, and then we'll see what happens as the politics change as well.
All right, so just explain a little bit, generally speaking, with the permitting, what is the issue with the permitting? How does that play into this? And is it a win-win or is this a win-lose possibility?
Yeah. So they got, in Congress, there was a bipartisan effort at the end of last year to pass permitting reform that had some good things in it and some things that maybe some folks didn't like as much. But, the art of legislation is compromise. Or I should say, legislation is the art of compromise. And you're not going to get everything you want all the time in every bill. And I think there's a lot of interest in trying to get transmission. 95% of the projects waiting in the queue to connect to the grid are clean energy projects. And so there's real incentive to address permitting. So you're not having, five different agencies conduct five different environmental impact statements. That's repetitive. There can be more efficiency here. And and so the trade-off might be there are some natural gas plants that get built, and that's not ideal. But again, do we want the trade-off of most of this affordable, quickly being able to build projects are mostly clean? Like I said, 95% in the queue are clean. Do we want to help move those forward? That's an interconnection problem as well. But the other thing is the local approvals. We need to get folks in communities speaking up in favor of these projects and not just have some of the talking points that we see from the fossil fuel industry get disseminated to opponents who there's kind of a NIMBY aspect to it. And the local decision makers are not approving these projects in as much as they should be.
And that gets back to the messaging. That was actually going to be my next point with the NIMBY. Are you and Echo Communications? I've been reading the last year just so many reports of the NIMBY issue, and people don't want solar panels, and they don't want windmills, and this, that, and the other thing, and they're making, they're imposing roadblocks or whatever. I guess that maybe we didn't even our side didn't really anticipate going on there. So does Echo get involved in that,
So we
helping countering that message?
certainly we try to share the messaging that will resonate, and also to push back on what we know because we see the same opposition messaging everywhere. And so clearly it's not just someone in a given community coming up with that on their own. It's an intentional effort by the fossil fuel industry to spread this, and then the machine of the right-wing media that pushes that out, and then it shows up in local communities. And so yeah, we work to help counter that. There's an organization called Greenlight America that's whole focus is getting these projects built and influencing the local city council or county council or whatever it may be. And they have a great system to see when there's a project that's coming up. They engage, find folks that they can share messaging with, highlight the benefits, and make sure that we're not losing these votes by forfeit because no one else shows up. Because if you're a local elected official and you have three people who are against the project and nobody for it, it makes it easy for them to vote against the project that we need to get built. So there's a lot of good work that's happening in this space, and we need that to continue and build out even further.
Yeah, I read a report um, about a small community in Georgia. One of these clean energy projects was going to start. It's going to employ a lot of people. The community needed that and all that. And they were interviewing people from that community, and they just had no idea about the project, what the project was about, that it was tied into the IRA legislation and all that. And we have a big country, and the messaging, with social media is just so rambunctious. I just wonder, I know you're in the messaging space to some degree, how we can really create a message that works, not universally, but at least in our country,
Yeah.
um, to educate. And before I let you answer that, I want to tell you, I just saw an amazing documentary on Kenneth Cole, um, the shoe designer, and his advocacy work he is amazing. He would led the charge with AIDS, and he's now involved in mental health. And one of the keys to his success, he discusses is getting all these, you have all these like mental health groups. They're all doing excellent work, whatever, but they really weren't unified. And I think to some degree, maybe that's our problem. But I'll let you answer on how do we improve the messaging.
Yeah, there's certainly some broad, applicable everywhere messages that can be helpful, but I think actually getting more specific, tailoring what you're saying to a given community makes it feel more real versus generic national messaging to these local officials who might be voting, and honestly just getting the community on board, like emphasizing how it's going to help that community, how it's going to help people who are looking for work, good paying jobs, and reducing energy bills. That's another area of that's really broadly applicable to people is their energy bills because these, rates are going up. We'll see this summer rates go up. And then again, as more demand comes from the hyperscalers and the data centers, they're gonna increase demand and that's gonna mean that the prices could go up for everyday people just trying to pay and to cool their house this summer or heat it in the winter. And so the specific local benefits are something that can really help to break through and feel like um, they can be a good counter to the opposition that we hear too often that are predictable.
All right, so give me what are you doing next? What's on the, what's your next move?
Well, we're really focused on, again, this bill in Congress is not a done deal. And so there has to be everyone who has a stake in this getting involved. They can reach out to us. We can help them, tell them how they can get involved. Don't think that your voice does not matter because it does. And so we're very much focused on this over the next several weeks. We'll see how long it takes. It could go into the fall potentially. And the longer it goes, the more chance there is to highlight the problems with the bill that they're considering and make some changes. So that's number one. After that, we'll be looking at, like I was mentioning, permitting reform. I think there'll be an appetite to turn to that in Congress, and we'll see how we can try to get the best version of permitting reform if there's a deal to be had. And there's the budget. The president submits a budget every year, and Congress decides. Mostly, they say that's nice, and we're going to do our own thing. But trying to make sure that there's the appropriate budget so that we can achieve some of these goals. And the staffing at federal agencies has been scaled back, as everyone has probably seen in the news. And there needs to be programs in place in staffing in place to carry out some of these important goals that the agencies have.
All right, last question. So when you're talking about the little tweaks that can be made maybe to this legislation that might be beneficial, can you give me a couple of examples?
Sure. There's one very restrictive provision called the Foreign Entities of Concern provision, which means basically if you have a screw that came from China in your project, then you can't qualify for a tax credit. And it's some things that are that's a simple example, but there's some very real problems with that. It's very restrictive, and I think there's going to be some changes to loosen that while still adhering to the spirit of the provision. Another thing is the start date. Right now, the project has to be up project has to begin construction within 60 days of whenever the bill passes, that might be relaxed a little bit. And then, I think we'll see some changes with geothermal and nuclear those are bipartisan energy sources. Certainly Republicans like those quite a bit. And extending the eligibility and window for those back out to 2032 is something that we could see happen. So there's others, but those are a few examples. And it seems that one of the bigger challenges will be on the EV front. You're not seeing as much pushback on the EVs as I think could be warranted, but overall, there is a real chance to improve the bill from what the House sent over.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you for coming on today. Chris Moyer, founder and president of Echo Communications Advisors. I'm not going to say the future of our planet is in your hands, but I'll say that just to inspire you and into even doing more than you're already doing.
Yeah, no pressure, Greg. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, that'll do for this episode of Cut to the Chase. Hopefully, we'll bring Chris back later on after this is all settled and we're going to hear better news, right? You'll come back on and you'll give us the final tally, all right? And
I'd be happy to, and hopefully have some better news to share.
All right, folks. Remember, share this episode. I want you to share it, not for my numbers, but so that this message, because we're talking about messaging and people out there are getting the wrong message, and this is the right message. So share, like, subscribe, and all that. And if you're a startup or you're interested in this space or whatever, give Chris a call. He'll help guide you, to how you make it a reality. Okay, Chris, get back to work.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.